Welcome to the Feed Your Family Tonight podcast. Do you dread hearing the question, what's for dinner? Whether you spend your days keeping up with toddlers, running kids to after-school activities, or juggling a career and family, getting dinner on the table can be a struggle for us all. I'm Mariefiebach, a business owner, wife, and mom of 4. I'm on a mission to build stronger families one dinner at a time, and I'm here with tips, tricks, and inspiration you need to feed your family tonight. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Feed Your Family Tonight podcast, episode 167. I am so happy to be here with you today. I'm your host, Mariefiebach, and today we are going to be talking about how to get out of a dinner rut. You know, we all have times where we feel like we're making the same meals over and over again. And today I have 4 tips to get you out of that rut. And the last one is my favorite. So stick around for that tip number 4. But first, I want to thank today's sponsor, Yummy Crate. Something that you may not know about me is that I love science. And I learned to love science at a very young age by cooking in the kitchen. And in the new year, I want to continue to share that love of science with my children in the kitchen. And that's why I love Yummy Crate. It is a new line from KiwiCo that gets the entire family into the kitchen with hands-on, kid-tested recipes that teach science and food at the same time. My 14-year-old daughter and 10-year-old niece made pancakes from the Rise and Shine box, and they learned about how leaveners work, and they had so much fun. Yummy Crate was designed to foster a love of science and cooking in kids ages 6 to 14 with recipes and activities that explore hands-on experimentation in the kitchen. Each box has high-quality kitchen tools to build confidence and creativity. So bring the fun of experimentation into your kitchen all year long with Yummy Crate from KiwiCo. Get 50% off your first month plus free shipping with the code FYFT for Feed Your Family Tonight at kiwico.com. That's 50% off your first month at kiwico.com. Use the promo code FYFT. Friends, dinner ruts are real. We all have a time where we feel like we are in a rut. And January is often a time where we want to kind of freshen things up. I remember years ago, I was in a mom's group at church, and we had a speaker come, and she talked about how January was her busiest month as an interior decorator because during December, everybody's house is all dressed with all their Christmas decorations, and they get all the Christmas decorations put away, and they're sitting in their home, and they're thinking, oh gosh, everything feels tired and dull, and I'm ready for something new. And so then they would call the decorator to have her come and help them freshen up their homes in January. And I feel like that kind of happens with our meals too. We've kind of had some wintry weather in November and December, and then January, that hard, cold, wintry hits, at least in my part of the country. Everything just feels dull and tired, and we feel like we're having the same things over and over again. So today I have 4 tips to help you get out of that dinner rut and kind of freshen the things that you are making. The tip number 1 is that it's okay to be boring. I recorded an episode a long time ago, episode 90, about how it's okay to be boring. And you may not want to hear that as your first tip in getting out of your dinner rut, but I want to start with acknowledging that there are seasons of life when you are in survival mode. And the best thing you can do is just put your head down and make the same meals over and over again and just get by. I've said before that feeding your family is enough. And if you are in a really busy or tough season of life, you're not going to have the bandwidth for the creativity that these other 3 tips are going to have. And I just want you to know that that's okay. We all have seasons where we're just doing the best we can, and it's okay to be really boring. Okay, so tip number 2 is a little bit more practical for actually getting out of your dinner rut, and that is to make small tweaks to your regular meals. You don't necessarily need to have a complete arsenal of new recipes. Small changes can really freshen up your regular repertoire. So, for example, you can make chicken tacos instead of beef tacos. So you're switching out the protein, but using the same flavors. You can use a different shape of pasta. Something as simple as switching from spaghetti to wagon wheels or bow ties or penne can really make a big difference. And while we're on the topic of pasta, instead of having your pasta and then scooping the sauce over the top of it, which is how we usually serve it in our home, what if you mixed the pasta with the sauce, threw it in a casserole dish, topped it with a little bit of cheese, and baked it for 15 minutes? You're still having basically the same ingredients, but it feels totally different. I actually totally did this last week. My meal plan had spaghetti on the list, and one of my children, who isn't the biggest fan of spaghetti, grumbled. And so I said, you know what? Okay, we don't have to have spaghetti. So I made baked penne, and I took my jar of pasta sauce and I cooked my hamburger, and I cooked penne pasta instead of spaghetti, and I mixed it all together, put it in a casserole dish, threw some cheese on half of it. Half my family doesn't like cheese, so half the family had cheese, half the family didn't have cheese, and it was a totally different meal. Or I could have swapped out the beef for sausage. Small little tweaks with the same ingredients can make the meals feel fresh. If you're making a lot of broth-based soups, add some cream to the broth-based soup, and maybe add a little bit of roux that you've made where you take a little bit of butter and a little bit of flour and you cook it for a couple minutes and then add the cream to that so that it thickens the soup and you have this thickened, creamy soup that was just a regular vegetable soup or a regular chicken soup. Making it creamy can be a way of changing it. Or you can swap out dumplings or rice for the regular noodles, or get some of that frozen tortellini or some of the shelf-stable tortellini. Swap out tortellini for your favorite noodle in your soup and see how your family likes the difference. Again, you don't have to have all new things to freshen up old recipes, and it can make a big difference. Tip number 3, try a new recipe. I know that sounds obvious, but the hardest part for new recipes for me is finding ones that meet all of my picky family's preferences. I can see you all nodding that yes, that is the hardest part of finding new recipes. I actually recorded an entire podcast on how to pick a recipe your family will actually eat. It's episode 146. So if you're really interested in that, take a deep dive and go listen to that episode. Let me give you some of the highlights. The biggest thing is that you don't want to change too many things at a time for your family. And I use the example, you don't want to go from a spaghetti and meat sauce to a chickpea curry. You want to either change the main ingredients or you want to change the flavors, but don't change them both at the same time. So going from a spaghetti and meat sauce to a chickpea curry, you're changing it from meat to a legume, and you're changing the flavors from oregano and garlic to flavors that are curry flavors like coriander and cumin. You would be more successful if you maybe started to make a meat curry where you still have the tomato sauce and you still have the meat, but you've changed the flavors from oregano to the curry. Or make a lentil spaghetti sauce, make a meatless spaghetti sauce where you have the garlic and the oregano and the tomatoes. You still have those flavors, but you've changed from a meat to a lentil. When you are looking at recipes online, in magazines, in cookbooks, I've said over and over again, there are a million recipes in the palm of your hand, and it's so easy to scroll and scroll and scroll and not find ones that work and start feeling defeated. So when you find recipes or you're looking at recipes, I want you to ask yourself 2 questions. The first thing is, what in this recipe is familiar to my family? The second question you want to ask is, what in this recipe is different than things I am already making? Now, most people are probably asking those 2 questions at a subconscious level anyway. As they're scrolling through those recipes, they're already thinking, what is familiar and what is different about this recipe than something I already make. But I want you to start consciously asking those two questions every time you look at a new recipe and you're evaluating it as a possibility to bring in your home. When you are asking those two questions intentionally, it will be easier for you to choose recipes that are half familiar and half new. And when you are using recipes that are half familiar and half new, you are more likely to have buy-in from your family when you make it for them. So tip number 3 is try a new recipe. Tip number 4, this is my favorite tip, is to go to a new grocery store. There is something about walking into a Whole Foods or even a Trader Joe's sometimes that says, yes, I'm going to make a sweet potato gnocchi with a garlic sage cream sauce and poached salmon with an escarole and arugula salad with champagne vinaigrette. Sometimes just seeing the food displayed differently or in a more beautiful way, you can walk past a meat case and see a cut of meat or a cut of fish that you haven't made in a long time, can spark your creativity. But when you go to this new grocery store, I want to do a couple of things. The first thing is I want you to give yourself time. Don't make this like a 15-minute trip to the grocery store. Give yourself 45 minutes to an hour to leisurely walk through the grocery store. And if possible, give yourself a little bit of blow money in your budget so that you can buy something that might be a little more expensive than you usually buy, but it might spark some creativity. So even $10 or $20 extra can really help you be a little bit more creative as you're walking through the grocery store. The other thing is, when you're doing this, try not to have it be like your weekly grocery trip. Make a special trip to the store just to walk through and think of something for one meal, to give yourself a little bit of creativity for one meal. And I tell you what happens when you do this is, first of all, just slowing down and going through the store with a little extra time can spark creativity. You can see something and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't made a recipe with that ingredient in ages, but I have a recipe for sheet pan sausage and veggies or something. And you see the beautiful peppers that are lined up in the grocery store, or you see the sausage and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't made that recipe in a long time. So you'll remember an old recipe that you used to make, and it reminds you that you haven't made it in a while. The second thing that sometimes happens is I'll see a new product, and maybe it's a marinade or a new cut of meat or fish from the butcher case, or it might be a veggie that I've never cooked with or haven't used in a long time. Today, I bought some kale. I had a slower trip to the grocery store, and I have not bought kale literally in years, friends. My family's not so big on the greens, and I haven't bought kale in a long time. But a friend was talking about a kale and sausage soup, and I was in the grocery store and I was walking through the produce aisle and I saw this beautiful display of kale, and I was like, you know what? I am going to make that kale and sausage soup that Betsy was talking about today. It was on the Dinner Sisters podcast. I'll link to it. My friend Betsy and her sister Kate have a really fun podcast, and they were talking about this kale and sausage soup, and I saw the kale in the grocery store and I was like, yeah, I'm going to get some kale. And so tonight on my menu is kale and sausage soup. You go to the store and it sparks a conversation that you've had, or it reminds you of something that you saw, and you'll get a little bit more creative. The other thing is to look at the end caps in the grocery store. End caps are the ends of the aisles, and oftentimes there will be promotional items there. When a company is launching a new product, they will pay for space on the end caps in the grocery stores. That's where people do a lot of impulse buys, and it's often a great way to find new products that you've never tried. Now, most of the time, I'm going to tell you, resist the end caps because they are meant to be impulse items. But when you're trying to get out of a dinner rut, An impulse item may be exactly what you need to spark some creativity. So pay attention to the end caps because they're usually things that are new or things that are seasonal that help you plan meals that you can go home and make tonight. So to recap, first thing is, it is okay to be boring. You can make small tweaks to some of your regular meals that will make a big difference and make them feel fresh all over again. You can try a new recipe. Just remember to ask those 2 questions when you're evaluating a new recipe. What about this recipe is familiar? What about this recipe is different? And try and find recipes that are about half and half. And go to a different grocery store with a little bit of time and just a little bit of extra money in your budget so that you can have the brain space to be creative and try new things. All of these ideas can help pull you out of a dinner rut. And I want to know, what do you do when you're in a dinner rut to pull yourself out of that rut? Share with me in the Feed Your Family Tonight Facebook group, or if you take a grocery shopping trip to a new grocery store, take a little picture and tag me on Instagram. I would love to see the things that spark creativity for you. For now, friends, you have got this. Take care.